Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 News. Red Bull have revealed exactly what they are expecting of Liam Lawson against Max Verstappen if he is to retain his seat, which Sergio Perez did not do this season. Perez was on average nearly half a second in qualifying behind Max in representative sessions. Red Bull want Liam Lawson to be at least within 0.3 of a second, or he might be out of the team in a similar way to Perez was. But even 0.3 of a second difference, if the cars are as competitive as they were this season, that could be the difference between P1 and P8 on the grid. Very much interested in your thoughts on this assertion in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. First of all, this seems to be Adrian Newey's Aston Martin Checkers cash. Because here he is over Christmas. I believe his birthday is on Boxing Day, as in yesterday, with, a Buzz Lightyear suit on. He looks absolutely buzzing with it. So, yeah, he's obviously working with Aston Martin in the very near future on primarily their 2026 car. But speaking of 2025, a couple of things coming out of Auto Racer, formerly known as Formula Uno. I think they're kind of integrated into the whole same thing, discussing the plan for 25 and certainly where Hamilton fits into that. The interesting pieces that we've not heard before are as follows. Loic Serra has the opportunity in his career to show what he's capable of doing as a technical director. He will live 7 days a week in Maranello. Of course, he is the hire from Mercedes, who reportedly has a pretty similar idea of concept to what Hamilton prefers in this ground effect era. He joined a little while ago. He's now fully working on the project. We talk about the whole 99% stuff before. This is interesting though, that apparently their team atmosphere is very good. There's good self-esteem. They want to keep a low profile. Of course, these guys never say anything bad about Ferrari typically, but they did say this. Hamilton's first steps in red. Ferrari will broadcast on its social networks his first day at Maranello as a driver. So apparently there's going to be like a big broadcast for, it's meant to be the 21st or the 22nd of January when Hamilton is in Ferrari colours for the first time driving Ferrari machinery, potentially the SF23 from a couple of years ago. It's going to be a big moment, and Ferrari are prepared to fully broadcast that, it seems. But let's talk about the situation at Red Bull. This is Yuki Tsunoda on his Abu Dhabi tyre test, and it's an incredible shot, and it took me ages to figure out exactly what I'm looking at here. It may help you to figure out where we are looking to show you this image of, it's basically the same shot, but I think you guys might get this a little bit clearer. So this is the Abu Dhabi pit lane exit. You come out of the exit, you go through this tunnel underneath the track, and that's what this shot is all about. I think it's such a poignant image actually of Tsunoda at his post-tyre test driving into the, unforgivable darkness, it seems, of the decisions that Red Bull have eventually made. Hadjar's coming in alongside Yuki. We know that Horner's been talking about that, but everyone kind of wants to know, what's Lawson gonna do in the Red Bull seat next year, and is he gonna be able to do anywhere near enough? Sergio Perez has been poor, no doubt, over the last couple of years, and with respect even to the Albon days, the Gasly days, Perez in many respects has been substantially worse. Lawson will need to be significantly better, but of course the whole point of bringing Lawson in is to win the constructors again. Red Bull believe that they have Max capable of winning the drivers, probably with whatever car they give him, as long as it's reasonably competitive near the front of the field. And also, Red Bull will be confident that Lawson will very rarely outscore Verstappen, kind of like how Perez did. But of course, there's a difference between Max winning 25 points coming first and Perez scoring 2 points for P9 and Max winning and then, Lawson hypothetically coming P4 for, 12 points or whatever. That's a big difference when it comes down to the constructors. That's where Lawson needs to be. But of course, there will be, as there always are with Red Bull, performance-related contract exemptions, where if you're performing like this, there was a rumour with Perez, wasn't there, that if he had less than half Verstappen's points at the summer break, they could get rid of him, but they decided not to, for various political, maybe financial related reasons. So Red Bull are still asserting that Perez kind of like decided to leave or take a sabbatical. That's certainly what Horner said. Marco doesn't go that far, but he does kind of describe, a separation was the best thing kind of for both parties. Red Bull still do confuse me. But Marco went on to say a few interesting things on Yuki and why Yuki was not selected. Especially interesting to me because Yuki is typically Helmut's guy. He's the guy that Marco tended to prefer out of the two of them. But look, we know that Horner won the power battle, so to some degree, Marco has to kind of toe the party line. And maybe Marco isn't wrong in what he says, but I still find it a little bit confusing, to be honest. So in terms of speed, Tsunoda is definitely the faster of the two at the moment, says Marco. So, because obviously Horner was saying, oh, well, it was close. Marco's saying, yeah, Yuki is the quicker driver, but he doesn't have the necessary consistency and keeps making mistakes. Now, I would say that also applies to Lawson, but of course Lawson has far fewer races, so I get it, why they feel like Lawson has a higher ceiling, but it's not like Lawson is the most consistent driver in the world either, but he's done, 11 Grand Prix. So I know why Red Bull say, oh, well, he's going to get more consistent with time, which may be true or maybe not be true. We don't really know the answer. Then there are his outbursts of anger. Lawson is the mentally strongest of our juniors, which again, I think, you could contend that statement, but I know where Red Bull are coming from here. He went on to say this: he has improved considerably with his outburst of anger, but they are still a factor. Then he loses control. He then slows down and loses his composure. Now, there have been a couple of examples this season where he's not had the best time. I mean, obviously the big one probably was Bahrain really this season, right? When Yuki wasn't happy about the way that he was treated from a strategy point of view with respect to Ricciardo, and then he sent that dive bomb, whatever, down the inside of Ricciardo into turn, 8 or whatever it is on that circuit. And that caused quite a lot of controversy, and it showed that, sure, while Yuki is on top of things better now, it's not like he's fixed, I guess is the way that Red Bull see it. But also, you want a bit of passion, you want a bit of emotion, do you not, from your drivers? Because, I feel like a complete robot, emotionless robot driver is never actually any good. You need that emotional balance to get the best, the fastest version out of a driver. Now, I understand that Red Bull seeking a second driver, that kind of level of characteristic doesn't really apply to some extent. But, that's what he questions, Marco. We believe that it would cause great emotional difficulties if Tsunoda realised alongside Max that he could not beat him, possibly not even come close, and that things were not going as he imagined, explains Marco, referring to the Japanese hothead. Now, it's an interesting statement, and I wouldn't say it's unfair and unfounded. I think any driver that Red Bull put in that position, they have to consider that Max, for various reasons, is probably going to destroy them to some degree. And how are they going to cope with that is a question. Now, I think the Yuki would probably be quick enough with respect to Max that that'd be all right, but obviously Yuki is not a driver that's going to be happy with being second fiddle anyway, so I do know why Red Bull are saying this, but equally, I'm not sure Lawson is necessarily better, or has Lawson shown more evidence that he would be better at dealing with those situations than Yuki would? I'm not sure he has. I think it's more so that they kind of believe that because he's not done that many Grand Prix, he will be able to manage it better than Yuki will, who has maybe more history and hasn't maybe improved as much as Red Bull wanted. I don't know. It's still a matter for debate. The question really is, how long a tenure, a leash, might Lawson have? Is he going to be kicked out of the team mid-season and they say, you know what, Yuki's faster, we're going to give him the drive? It's not impossible. Obviously, Marco says that he expected Yuki not to get the drive, and Lawson said that he has the mental strength to drive alongside Max and accept that he will not stand a chance against the Dutchman. He still has potential for further development, and he is down to earth. And then he said the following: Marco's expectation for Lawson is that he will not place more than 0.3 of a second behind Verstappen in qualifying. Now, it's always a question as to why this whole 0.3 number is consistently mentioned, but typically 0.3 off your teammate is like the lower acceptable bound for speed. And at a top team, that could be, at least in the past, the difference between P1 and P2 if your car's a rocket ship. But of course, nowadays, that may be the difference between P2 and P10 with the way that the grid was looking towards the end of this season. And that was a big problem for Perez. 0.3 off Max, even 0.4 off Max is kind of okay if you're in an RB19, and even then that wasn't the best qualifying car compared to its race performance. So, let's say you're in a Mercedes W08 or whatever, or I guess the W07 from 2016 or whatever might be a better example, but the point that if you've got a car that's very fast, 0.3 is okay, but 0.3 maybe is not so okay nowadays. But that, it seems, is the target. Lawson has been told, probably there's some statement about score this many points with respect to Max to help the constructors, but also just don't be too slow. is beneficial for the team, obviously. So where was Perez, and what can we expect from Lawson going forwards? This data, courtesy of F1Pace.com, he always does a killer job putting all of this stuff together. So yeah, you guys can feel free to check this out in your own time if you want more details. But these are the qualifying numbers from the most recent season between teammates. So the differences were very marginal between a number of pairings: Leclerc and Sainz, Gasly and Ocon, even Tsunoda Lawson, despite the fact that Tsunoda beat him every time. It was actually very close. Tsunoda Ricciardo was slightly less close. Norris Piastri, Albon Colapinto, Russell Hamilton. Obviously, we can see the numbers as well head to head here. So Lawson, I guess this also includes sprints. So when you include that, the numbers are a bit different. But still, for example, Russell Hamilton, Verstappen Perez was 29-1. With, was it Baku, the exception there? And the biggest gap on the grid was actually Bottas Zhou. But there are, to be fair to Zhou, probably a couple of caveats in there, given the fact that it didn't seem like he had the full upgrade package or exactly the same car as Bottas for some of the season. Whatever. These are the numbers in question in percentage terms. Now, just to keep in mind, if you've got a lap like Spa, which is a 140, a 1 minute 40, right? So you're talking roughly 100-second lap. 1% over 100-second lap is 1 second of difference. So around Spa, 0.543% is, you know, over half a second. You're talking more like 6/10 around a circuit like Spa. Most circuits, though, aren't as long as Spa. So you're talking 1 minute 20 for a lap or whatever. So effectively, if you look at the numbers here on the left-hand side, the 0.543% difference per lap between Verstappen and Perez equates to roughly 0.45 seconds. That's the general number that gets thrown around, is that, you know, a 0.55% delta is roughly 0.45 when it comes down to actual pure lap time on an average lap. So, you know, the percentage data is more representative, if you know what I mean, like around different circuits. The percentage number is a better number and metric to use, but it's not as easy on the eye, if you see what I'm saying. About 0.3 a lap sounds better than 0.42% difference that they want, or whatever the numbers are, as we've discussed over the last few minutes. These are some other kind of graphical representations as well as to when the respective drivers have been faster and in what regard, really. Like, this is like a cumulative graph, a rolling median, and you can see that for many partnerships, such as, you know, Piastri and Norris, they're pretty competitive, but, you know, obviously Lando just a bit faster. The same with Russell generally in Hamilton this season, and obviously Sainz and Leclerc very competitive as well. Verstappen Perez, I mean, he started 4, you know, tenths roughly away from Max, and he got a bit better into round 6, and then just, you know, every single race almost got worse and worse, and ended up with a pretty horrific overall performance relative to Max. Even these numbers aren't pretty either. These are qualifying performances, and you can see, you know, comparisons between drivers, and usually you'll see the little graphic for each driver is relatively similar between the teammates. But not really the case for Perez and Verstappen. Verstappen has this nice big loads of green, similar to Lando, similar to Leclerc, and maybe not far off Russell, whereas Perez has a number of Q2s and plenty of Q1 exits as well. Max had none of those at all, and even the P12 was in Brazil, right, where he got unlucky with the red flag, and then we know what happened shortly after that. Even this data, on average during the season, these are qualifying positions. Max had the highest. His worst quali was 12th, his best was 1, and Verstappen's median qualifying position was actually 2nd. So even when Max didn't have the best car, he still put in some, generally speaking, excellent performances. Lando was 2nd, Sainz was actually 3rd in terms of average qualifying position, but it was very competitive between Sainz, Russell, Piastri, Leclerc, then Hamilton, and then, you know, quite a way back we get Perez in that no man's land, really, between himself and Alonso. And even then, I mean, Perez did have a 2nd qualifying in, Spa, wasn't it? That didn't go to plan. And then, of course, his worst was 19th. So, not pretty, these numbers, and they don't get any better if we look at the race pace as well. So, yeah, Perez's delta, we're talking half a second, roughly. 0.4, half a second to Max this season, and we know what that resulted in terms of the Constructors and the Drivers' Championship. Perez was nowhere near, and obviously that bad quali then puts you in a position where your delta in the race is probably getting even worse. For example, here Max had the fastest, and if you compare the numbers in percentage terms, that's a bigger race pace delta than it is in qualifying. But you'd expect that because if you're stuck in traffic, but obviously there's maybe more factors to it as well. Even this I thought was remarkable. This is rolling relative race pace among the top 4 teams, and you'll find that Max, his race pace started faster than anyone, apart from Perez, who was here. But as we went from, Emilia-Romagna to Monaco through to pretty much the Silverstone Grand Prix, Perez's performance and his delta line just fell off a cliff. It got marginally better, then it got worse again, and you can see that Perez's line moves a bit in line with what happened with Verstappen, but the reality is that Norris's line came closer to Max, Verstappen's line came up, and Perez just disappeared into the ether in terms of race pace. Like, you can see that Lando's here, Piastri's here, and then the Mercedes of Russell, Hamilton, Sainz, Leclerc, all very closely together, and you had pretty much the 2 championship contenders, and then, Leclerc very consistent, but Perez was nowhere. And in terms of delta, this is unacceptable, right? Like, Lawson needs to be in here with these guys, assuming the cars are a similar relative performance next season. So what do you guys think is going to happen next? How's Lawson going to get on? If the challenge from Red Bull is be within 0.3 of Max, that is, okay if the car's great. If the car isn't so great, it's not like he's going to score many more points being 0.3 off than being 4.5 off that Perez was. He will score some more points, but he won't maybe score enough more points to make a substantial difference. If the Red Bull is a bit better next year, that certainly helps Lawson, but also, can he get to that, position, right? Because we've seen many a driver, Albon, Gasly, Kvyat, among others, have struggled to get within that kind of delta of Max. Only obviously the Ricciardo days were slightly different. So that's the challenge that Red Bull are putting out there to Lawson. That's what he's got to deliver on. And it's interesting that Red Bull haven't entirely closed the door on Yuki. I just do wonder if, Lawson doesn't live up to these expectations halfway through a season, whether Yuki still has half a chance of getting the drive in the second half of the season. We know that Red Bull are pretty ruthless, but I think that they are confident that Lawson is the man for the job. But obviously, he's got a challenge and he's got pressure on. We know this is how Red Bull do things, and Marco is not afraid to say publicly, this is what Lawson's got to deliver, either in terms of point or in terms of pure pace. And if he can't, then that's not good enough. And Perez got fired for, a lot worse, arguably, than what some of the other drivers have been fired for in recent memory. So, there was some further talk on this end of November, I thought, about how, the discussion on Yuki's mental rigidity or strength or whatever might be somewhat inconclusive, because it also fails to consider maybe the Red Bull side exactly what they've put him through, and the fact that he's still dealing with it and ready to take down the next teammate they put in his way. This time it seems it's going to be Isaac Hadjar. But very much interested in your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.